thank you for joining today's Amplify Your Impact webinar session. This is a series designed to highlight digital skills and accessible tools that can help you share your message with your community. Future Generations University's mission is to advance research, learning, and action towards inclusive and sustainable community change worldwide. And we do that in a variety of ways through education, action research, peer-to-peer learning, just like what we're going to bring to you with today's session. So we're very pleased to welcome you. And if you haven't already done so, please take a moment to share your name and where you're logging in from in the chat. Before we get started, I just have a few housekeeping reminders. After this brief introduction, we're going to have a presentation by Lindsay Kazarick, who's going to share all about ways to have a community-centered, public-facing presentation or slide deck, how to create one. And then we're going to have an open discussion, a forum for us to share tips and ask questions and share resources. And then we'll end with final questions and then a little preview for next week. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, you have a Q&A button, but please feel welcome to use that to ask questions throughout the presentation. Or you can also use the chat bar to offer advice or ask questions. And then this presentation is recorded and it will be sent to everyone along with the slide deck in the upcoming days. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lindsay to introduce yourself more thoroughly and take us into today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. As Deborah so wonderfully introduced me, my name is Lindsay Kazarick, and I am the Recruitment and Communications Associate here at Future Generations University. I have had the pleasure of sitting in class with so many of you and creating wonderful presentations. And so today, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. But before we get started, I just want to make sure that we don't have any bandwidth issues with me leaving my video on. If we do, and there's any lag, please just mention that in the comments and I'll go ahead and turn my video off. I want to be respectful of that. In today's presentation, what we are going to cover is really honing in our audience, discovering the purpose of the presentation, choosing our imagery and the medium of the presentation, and looking over the design. If you want to know more about how to create the actual presentation, you can refer back to our first season of Amplify, where we really dug deep into that context in that Amplify series. And if you need the link to that, we'll put that in the chat a little bit later. Next slide, please. So when we're starting off with our audience and we're thinking about who we're talking to, we really want to think about who that message is going to be delivered to before we really ever even think about what's going to be put on the slides. So the community presentation is really going to succeed when people can very quickly identify themselves in your message. And so this is where it's really important to identify who in your community is going to hear this message and what does this audience already know? What do they need to hear or have explained about your project, about your mission, about what is happening. So drop in the chat who might be the different audience members that you would be talking to in your community and how you would go about talking to them. So what language would you be using in your presentation? So if you are talking to your donors in your community, for example, you might be using a completely different language and tone than you would say the people that you are looking to organize in your community. And so as you are starting to shape the messaging of, of your presentation, or starting to just think about how you want to shape the general tone, here is where you're thinking about what words feel familiar to this audience, what is respectful to this audience, um, what are they specifically worried about, and what gets them excited, and what major decisions and what roles are they in that they have the ability to influence in this moment. Those are all very important deciding factors on that messaging that you want to have in your mind as you are starting to shape that presentation. And that is the action you're hoping that they're going to take after they view your presentation. And the other thing that's really important that you want them, or that you want to be considering as you are developing this messaging strategy, is how much time, how much bandwidth, how much tech is all of this going to take, excuse me, on behalf of that entity? And do they realistically have that to engage with you? And so these are all really important things to consider as you're moving forward with that audience consideration. Because if you are talking to your audience and those are all off, it's not going to make sense and it's the wrong message. So as we move into the next slide, please, Deborah. What do we mean by your community? So if you're not part of our community here at Future Generations University, as a reminder, we define community as people who share something in common and have the ability to together. And so here we operate our um, our classes in an online um, campus, and then our students have the, okay, I'm going to turn my video off. Thank you for letting me know, Chris. Um, our jobs are then to lower the friction and act together online with our messaging. We can take that into our communities very easily. Next slide, please. Depending on how we are delivering this message. And so one way that we can do that is by utilizing an audience map or a message map. And knowing what needs to be delivered for your audience in these 4 boxes is a really good place to start. And I recommend you starting here, because if you cannot answer all 4, then it's your message is probably too generic. So what does your audience need to understand is in the knowledge box. What is the need? So what problem, question, opportunity, what solution brings them here? Excuse me. For a decision, what do they need to feel or do afterwards? If you can clearly state that in that box, move on, and then access. What language, format, technology, messaging, emotion will help them to engage, and clearly state that there. And again, if all 4 of those aren't answered, then it's a little generic. Try to fill it out to have a more robust messaging. Next slide, please. So the way that really helps you to hone in on doing this with your presentation is to have a presentation that can inform, invite, train, celebrate, persuade, or mobilize, but you're not going to equally do that all at once. So you have to know, what is the purpose of your presentation? What are you wanting this to do for your audience? So before, again, you're building out these slides, say to yourself, by the end of this presentation, my audience will be able to, and then over here, just as, some ideas, my audience will be able to understand something new. That's very generic, but for your community, maybe they will understand the basics of poultry production. By the end of this presentation, my audience will see the community as a tourism destination. By the end of this presentation, my audience will commit to a new action. Maybe it's committing to community cleanup once a month. And so you can see how once you hone in on that purpose, you then have a specific goal that you are now trying to achieve with your presentation, and it's more clear for you as to what you're trying to do. So your purpose then becomes your editing tool that you're going to use for your whole entire presentation. And if the slide then doesn't serve the purpose, then you edit it out. You just say, hey, it was a great idea, and you politely let it go. Next slide, please. So image selection, we hear a lot about this in class. Image selection shapes how the community is seen. Now, when I say image, we all very easily think picture. But a picture isn't the only way that we can have a visualization in a presentation. A picture is worth 1,000 words, absolutely. But there are graphs, there are infographics, there are different ways there that we can depict what is happening in our community with charts, with video, with all different kinds of technology that we have in 2026. So you don't have to just use an image. However, if pictures are all that you have available to you, there are some important image selection criteria that you should be thinking of as you move forward with your presentation, because the images that you select help shape how the community is seen, not just to outside entities, but also how the community sees itself. And so as you are going through this, the visual question isn't just, is this attractive, but also what story about people and place is this image telling? And so some of the things that we like to consider as we are looking at images to choose is the image, showing action. You know, you don't really want to have posed people, and a lot of times that's what people naturally do when they see a camera come out, is they all stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder, and take the picture. And that, sometimes those pictures are absolutely necessary to have. But when donors or community partners or potential volunteers are looking at organizational communications, they want to see sort of like the real stuff, what's really happening. And so that's where what we call those action shots come into play. And so those are the not posed things. Those are the pictures of people doing real things. Maybe it's a teacher in the classroom teaching students. Maybe it's a farmer out in the field on a tractor, or maybe it's a producer in the forest tapping trees. Maybe that looks like volunteers helping, clean up, or children trying vegetables that they haven't had for the first time. It could be a bunch of different things. Action doesn't necessarily mean people running a marathon or jumping up and down. It just means them doing something in their natural environment. But as we are doing this, we always want to make sure that there is dignity and ability, leadership, and connection within the community, because action, as Deborah just mentioned in the chat, equals activation. The texture of daily life in the community is extremely important to highlight. We want to make sure that we are being authentic and true to what we are showing, and we are giving evidence of movement, effort, and what is possible. I want to emphasize showing what is possible, planting the seed and showing to others how that seed can grow is very powerful. And that is what Future Generations University is all about. So we want to emphasize that it's important to do that, but also representing that in a way that feels accurate and not tokenistic. We want this to be real in what we are depicting, but we don't want this to feel like a solve all be all either. Next slide, please, Deborah. So a useful image set is one that often spans past, present, and future. And so when we are depicting our communities, this is a great way to also showcase historical documentation as well. So what has happened in the community, what is currently happening in the community, and where would the community like to go, or what plans do they have for the future? And you might be saying, well, I understand how I could potentially get pictures of the past. I know how I can get pictures and images of what's happening now, but what about the future? And so some of the ways that we have been able to depict the future is showing what we would like to see happen. And so we have been able to show images of partners that we would like to work with. We have been able to, we have seen where others, like partners, have gone and taken a picture of a plot of land where they would like to develop that land into either a a community center, or they want to turn that into a future farming area. And so, you can take a picture of that and explain what the community wants or needs for the next year, 5 years, 10 years. Maybe that looks like a vision board. Maybe your organization or your local organizing committee got together and that was documented, and your goals for the future were written down. Take a picture of what those plans were, and that is your documentation of future planning. It doesn't necessarily have to be extravagant. It just has to show what your next steps are. Or it doesn't even necessarily have to be an image. It might be a document. It might be an Excel spreadsheet. It might be a Word doc. Whatever that might be, this goes back to us saying, it doesn't have to be an image. It could be a chart. It could be a graph. But when your visuals cover all three, past, present, and future, it's so much more contextual for your audience, and they can understand what's happening and they can feel the current energy. And it also gives them that directional image of what your organization or your project is doing. And that's very powerful in a presentation. Next slide, please. So medium matters. And the medium is what your presentation lives on. So drop in the chat, what is your favorite medium to create a presentation on? Is it Google Slides? Is it PowerPoint? Do you like creating on a website? I'm curious what you all like to create on. So when we're here and we're making this decision, there's all different types of mediums to create a presentation on. We've got webinar decks, there's live community meetings, there's printable handouts, and this all really depends on your specific community need and what exactly is going to be the life of this presentation. Is it going to be multi-use? Is this going to be an in-person talk? Is it going to be something where it would be useful for you to present it on a screen, but also have a printed off leave behind? So these are all types of things for you to consider because then that would determine the medium that you would create this on. If it's a live talk, fewer words, bigger type, stronger speaking notes. If you're doing a webinar, like we are here, we have readable visuals, there's digital friendly examples. With this, we have the ability to have the digital version of this and then send you a PDF as well. So that's always an option. If you're doing it on mobile, you have the ability to reach a lot of people in so many different places and different formats. Simplified text, there's do you even have to have a visual because you can just go live on Facebook? There's so many different things to think about at that point, but that takes us back to your audience and what is right for your community. And what's going to work the best for you and them together. And sometimes what's going to work best for your audience and your community might mean that there's a little bit of a learning curve for you, and that's when it gets a little bit exciting. So let me know if you've had to learn some new tech to serve your community. That's always fun. Next slide, please. So this is also very important. Simple design choices make engagement easier. One idea per slide. Yeah. We as human beings have become products of social media and television and television commercials. Therefore, our attention spans are shorter and we consume information so much differently than what we did 20 years ago, 25 years ago, even 10 years ago. So we need one idea per slide. We cannot handle a bunch of text on a slide. We cannot handle a bunch of ideas on a slide. Our brains will not process that and consume that information. So the simpler, the better, and use fewer and better visuals, meaning large images and shorter text beat tiny everything everywhere all the time. So use a bigger visual and a smaller text on the slide, and that will help your audience both pay attention longer and understand the information that you are trying to deliver to them. And then design for access. So making sure that there's readable fonts, there's contrast, there's captions if needed, and plain language that will also widen participation. And so if people are trying to read paragraphs while you're talking, or if paragraphs are way too long and you're switching slides, then no one is able to pay attention. Next slide, please. So a community presentation is stronger when it follows a story arc. This also goes back to us being a product of television, movies, social media. We are hooked by a good story. So try to tell us the story of your community in your presentation. What is happening? Why does this matter now specifically? Who is already there acting, learning, building, being a part of this process? Talk about the opportunity. What could change next? And include an invitation. Always, always, always include some sort of an invitation. What do you want the audience to do? Do you want them to volunteer? Do you want them to donate? Do you want them to, excuse me, do you want them to come show up for an event? Do you want them to share this information with other people? Whatever it is, do not be afraid to ask, because if you do not ask, then you will not receive. The story is what is going to give the structure to your information, and it helps your audience to feel the journey instead of receiving just disconnected points. And we as human beings, um, we are emotionally reactive individuals. And so whenever we are able to tie something to an emotion, we're significantly more likely to react to that than to a fact. So that's why we like to have that story and that arc in there. Next slide, please. Engagement improves always when the audience gets to do something. So participation turns a presentation from transmission, just from one person giving information over, into a relationship. And you always want to have a relationship with your audience, or your donor, your community, your end user. So ask. A quick poll. That was always my favorite. Reflection, show of hands, invite, ask them to tell a story if you have the ability to do so, or provide an example. Use the chat, ask for responses or for participation, or the apply option. So if there is the ability for worksheets or a prompt, that they can take what you are talking about and use that immediately on hand, that's very powerful, because your audience is, if that is applicable to what you are doing in community. So even one thoughtful interaction, you know, every, 7 to 10 minutes or so, every 5 minutes, can reset attention and keep your audience focused on what you're talking about. That's why you want to try to work on engagement while you are presenting. Next slide, please. So some common mistakes that you want to try to avoid in your presentations is having too much text for a live presentation on your slide. Images that are showing people only as a problem. We want to show people as solutions. There's not really a clear call to action at the end of your presentation. That goes back to us talking about, um, you know, uh, having someone volunteer or donate or whatever it is that you want them to do. Just make sure that it's very clear that you want them to do something at the end of the presentation. Try not to use the same presentation for every audience. Your donors are going to respond completely differently than the part of your community that you're going to be speaking to, that's going to come and help you do volunteer work. And if you have the option to, use different presentation decks for different audiences, I highly encourage you to do that. And then, this is hard, but make sure that when you're designing your presentation, if your audience is going to be looking at it on a laptop, don't design it for a mobile phone. And if your audience is going to be looking at it on social media, don't design it for a laptop because things are definitely not going to look right. And then make sure that when you are including data, that it is presented with context, story, or relevance. Um, those are all really important because random facts just thrown at people, just like trying to throw spaghetti at a wall. It just might stick, it might not. It's a wasted effort. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of what not to do. These are my slides from presentations that I have given over the years. And I just wanted to provide visuals of this is what we should not do. So the slide up in the right-hand corner is super plain, black and white, way too much text, and not a single visual. I don't know what I was thinking there. But that could use some major improvements. And the slide underneath of it is extremely dark and gloomy. You can barely see Seneca Rocks behind it. And Seneca Rocks is used as a tourism destination for the West Virginia Department of Tourism. And it's a very inviting place that they use to attract people to come to West Virginia. This is not inviting. This does not say come to West Virginia. So I totally bombed the execution with this. The one to the left, again, way too text heavy. The image is way too small. And the point of that slide was to tie the lab together. And quite frankly, I could have just used the image to really tie the lab together instead of using all of the words. So those were some examples of really not great slides that I have created in the last few years. I wanted to kind of tear my own work apart. If you have presentations that you would like some help with, you are most welcome to send them over to our communications team, and we will help you with some feedback on those. I have not received any thus far, but next slide, please, Deborah. Here's a final checklist to review before you present. So make sure you say to yourself, I know exactly who this presentation is for. My purpose is clear in one sentence. So this is where we go back to this. At the end of this presentation, my audience will understand that sentence. My visuals show dignity, action, and direction. My format fits where the presentation will live. My slides are readable, simple, and accessible. And my ending includes a specific invitation or next step. And then if you go through this entire checklist and it is true, your presentation is far more likely to land with clarity and respect, and your audience will have a clear understanding of what it is that you are delivering in your message. Next slide, please. So present with communities, not just to communities. Your community, as we all know, is our greatest asset. The strongest presentations help people feel seen, understand the moment, and imagine the next step together. So as I'm closing out my part of the presentation today, I invite you to revisit one upcoming talk or presentation deck that you have recently created and rewrite the purpose in one sentence. Then replace one of the images with a stronger image and adapt the format for where it will live. And then end that presentation with a very clear next step. Those are just some super simple tweaks that you can make to create just a stronger presentation for your community and your audience. Thank you all so much. And if there are questions or examples of work, we're happy to help.
That was
Was
really, sorry, that was very helpful, Lindsay. I liked
uh,
the formulas that you came up with. Those are very helpful.
yes, agreed. And we have plenty of time some for some discussion. So chat, help us. What what resonated with you? What are your concerns for a presentation that you might have coming up? Or would anyone want to be promoted, or would anyone want to share something? You can, I'm going to put my email in the chat, and if you want to email me something, I can share it on the screen.
I've
Okay,
I
never
Beth.
think
used Prezi.
uh, it's a little bit more complicated than, in my opinion, than Google Slides or PowerPoint. There's lots of animation, and it has self-recording in it, so it can be really helpful. I used to use it for orientation for college students, um, for my health and safety presentation that I used to have to give. And so it was helpful because it had a lot of animations and movement. It made things very dynamic, um, but it requires a little bit of practice. I inherited that from another employee, so that's how I started working with it.
So Lori said in the chat that she needs assistance with some accessibility with the presentations, that they have visually impaired and hearing individuals, and we often feel that, you know, yeah. Um, Chris, I'm wondering, Deborah, with your experience, do you have any potential solutions or ideas for Laurie um, with her need for accessibility solutions?
So, so building on what Lindsay shared in this presentation, um, things that uh, visual ways that you can make your presentations more legible and more readable is really amping up high contrast. It is easiest to read dark text on a light background. Um, and so it tends to be easier to read sans serif text than serif text when you're doing because of the accessibility needs, and because we want to have simpler, fewer areas of text, and maybe instead of visuals, when you're having like headers or subheaders, those tend to be sans serif, which means that they don't have the little like loops. They don't look like script. They don't look like handwriting. They look like kind of blocky. That's easier to read. Um, and then the other thing that can be a practice is um, describing the image that might be seen on the screen. So you can say, this slide showcases two community members who are volunteering. They're planting, they're cooperatively planting apple tree seeds in the ground, right? So that you're actually building in some time to describe what's on the screen visually. And so some of that is just creating a script to go with your presentation that you do actually read. The other nice thing with that is you can provide that transcript afterwards so that people who can consume the presentation in real time but then afterwards they have the tools that will help them to absorb the information again. And when you provide those scripts or the transcripts, you can provide them in, choose a really simple font like Arial, which a lot of accessibility readers, there are going to be certain scripts that accessibility readers can read out loud more easily than others. So making sure that you understand which fonts e-readers will see. That this is true on web pages as well. And Chris, I see you've had your hand up.
I was going to say a simple test that you can do for contrast is if you turn a slide or what you're doing into black and white and it is still clearly legible, that is one great way to know you have sufficient contrast. If you do not have sufficient contrast, it's going to start to come together in those grays, and which means you need to change your contrast. So that's a little test that you can do for yourself. And Lori, actually, I would encourage you that everyone's abilities are different. And if you know who they are ahead of time, maybe ask for feedback of what's best for them so that you can incorporate that in a meaningful way. Because just, I mean, how you feel, I know this is going to be different, but how they feel is much more important. So you want to make sure that you've done what you can ahead of time, and maybe even follow up with them post if it's possible, of what's something that could have been done better, or how could you, are there materials that you could be sharing with them post as well?
And then Valerie has a couple of questions. She is interested in better ways to engage people virtually, as well as preparing guest speakers for presentation. Those are two really good questions. And Lindsay, let me compliment you on the way you engaged us during your presentation by often introducing ways for us to share things in the chat or to be participatory. So that already was just a great example.
Val, I didn't mean to do that again. Sorry. I'll tell you how I work with the alumni as guest speakers, because I want to make sure that I am helping everyone present themselves and the expertise that they truly hold. And so one of the things that I do is I set up, I ask for their slides 3 to 4 weeks in advance so that I have the ability to go through them. I look for how the format is to see if they need to have additional visuals. And then just because I know everyone's busy, I usually say, I would like to go ahead and make some adjustments. Are you okay with that? And help spread the slides out if that's helpful for them. In situations where I have a speaker who may not be as confident in English, I've offered to do translation for them, so that they feel comfortable, because I want everyone to feel that their ideas and what they're bringing to the table is valued, and to make sure that we have guardrails as far as time. I always try to make sure that I have things that are written out in an email, but then I also have usually a one-on-one conversation with them ahead of time to explain, this is the format, this is what we would like to do, and then this is how we're going to engage afterwards, as part of the session. And then for the other people that are in my session, I prep them as well. I ask them to look over the presentation ahead of time, have questions that they can come to the presentation with, and then I feed these things back and forth with people, so it helps get them into the mindset of where we're going, how we're going there. And so people aren't as stressed or nervous when they're presenting so they can really feel more at ease. And I think that translates to the attendees as well, because it's really interesting, like when you have someone speaking and you can tell there's like a disconnect between who's speaking and who's running the slides. I always feel like that's always an interesting dynamic. And so that's how I try to like minimize that through presentations. So, and I'll let you.
And what I was going to also add, and this actually speaks to Sammy's question that just was shared in the chat, which is how to control stress. And by control, I think you mean minimize stress before starting the presentation. So some of the ways to help also prepare a presenter and that also lowers stress is something that we practice before these sessions. We meet 15 minutes before the presentation starts. So we can do a tech run. We can make sure the background looks the way we want it to look. We can have a chance to like talk with each other. And that just also helps like lower the temperature and helps, people kind of relax into it. For some, when it's, for example, early morning and I might have like a scratchy voice because I haven't spoken to anybody since waking up. This gives a chance to like, to, fill your lungs. So there's some other simple techniques too, would just be, just practicing a few like deep breaths, like take a chance to like unclench your jaw, lower your shoulders, stretch your neck, like just a couple simple things that actually like interrupt your body's stress, like the parastress part of the nervous system. And those are other really helpful things. I also tell presenters, this goes back a couple of sessions ago, we talked about video editing, and also some of that was about like preparing your subjects to be on video. It is very common that people speak too quickly. So another thing to help, sometimes it's the same thing like unconscious bias. If you make it conscious, it is extremely helpful. It doesn't solve everything, but it does help bring to the surface things to think about. So when you're preparing a presenter or when you're trying to lower the stress level, just keep thinking about slowing down. Another handy thing that is helpful, and Chris actually introduces this a lot, is having a timer. So if you have presenters and you have a very tight timeline, and we've had this happen too when we've had multiple people presenting in a class or information sessions, and they really do only have 5 or 10 minutes. Actually putting your like a little timekeeper in front of you so that you can kind of easily see. That can raise your stress because you're like, oh, I want to fit it all in. But that can actually, honestly, it is a good preparation method for presentations so that you have a good sense of like the timing. The last thing I'll say is practicing beforehand. It seems like, oh yeah, look, Chris did it. It
Say
seems
there's a timer.
it's the kind of thing, it's like outlining a paper before you write it. It feels like kind of who has the time? But I'm dead serious. If you take that time, your presentation, your stress level is way lower, and you're able to like work out the kinks of speaking over, and especially as we're going to move away from like reading a slide. And we know that that's not an effective presentation technique. So having a chance to practice is extremely helpful.
One of the things that I do I do better in person than I do virtually is I know that I speak better if I'm standing, to be frank. I get to the point. I'm much more concise. And so some of those things are helpful. And if you need to change your monitor or change your configuration so that you're playing to your strengths, I think it's worth doing that. Like you can make adjustments for yourself so that you're setting yourself up as a speaker in a positive way. One of the things that I will say, I've used this timer in meetings and I've seen the stress levels of people get out of control. So use a timer like this. There's an application that you can add to Zoom to add timers, but use it with caution. Because I've seen people like they speak and then they see that they're running out of time and then all of a sudden it kind of also shuts people down. So depending on if that's your goal, whether or not you want to employ a timer like this, just FYI.
And I will add, Sammy, that it's important to know your stressors. So for me, I have ADHD. And if I was trying to present today and I was facing a window or I was facing anything that there was movement on the other side of my computer, it would have been this over, done with. I would have been so stressed out because I would have been distracted looking at what was going on and I would have been losing my train of thought. So I know that as Chris was saying, in preparing yourself for your presentation, that my computer is against a wall. I am looking at nothing but a blank white wall so that I have nothing distracting me. I know that I also I am a significantly stronger presenter if I am standing in a live presentation because I can move if I am standing. Um, I feel very confined when I am sitting, but I know that if I bounce my leg, none of you can see that I am bouncing my leg. And so these are just little things that I have done to help alleviate like the stressors and keep me focused because of having ADHD. I know that I'm a naturally fast talker. I try not to think about that too much because if I think about it too much, I'm actually going to talk faster. I talk with my hands. So these are some of the things that I naturally start doing in that 15-minute prep period that Deborah was referring to, and then have my station kind of set up the way I want it to, so that I am reducing the stressors that could potentially affect me as I am presenting. And it's okay to be stressed. I think no matter how many times you present, um, you're going to be a little stressed, and that just means that you care, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. We can speak to a common humanity. I don't think anyone's a stranger to feeling apprehension or even if it's happy anticipation. Um, it elevates your heart rate, but it also, it's activating and it means that we're alive together and we're doing something important. So, um,
I want to do something really quick. So who's in our, if you want to just pop into the chat, how many people have you spoken in front of so far? Like the quantity of people, just to give you an idea of 75. Well, you know what, honestly, Val, I think it's important. Lindsay used to tell me very frequently, she's like, because the fact that things would be recorded would bug me. And she's like, it's okay, just you get over it. And I'm like, no one's perfect. And that's where like laughing at yourself is very helpful. Um, yeah, I myself also, I've spoken to groups of 500 to 600 at a time. And I think when you work with groups that are larger versus the dynamic between the two is so different and it affects you differently. I get more nervous when it's a smaller group of people than it is with a larger group of people because I know that there could be more interaction and I could possibly like sway one way or another and I might lose my way in my presentation. So all the things that you can do. There's also fun little things. Make sure that you bring water with you for a presentation because when you swallow, it helps relax. It actually, it's a natural relaxant for your body. And so that's just like little things like that are can also very important to make sure that you're taking care of yourself and helping yourself not tense up.
And with that, I'm just going to say this has been so wonderfully dynamic. I'm going to share my screen for our final slide. I'm going to follow Lindsay's good advice and invite you to join us for next week. This will be our final presentation for the second season of the Amplify Your Impact webinar series. And Chris is going to lead us through an information session and a hands-on session for Kobo Toolbox, which is a mapping and survey software that we've introduced into some of our programs. Chris, will you tell us just a little bit about what we'll discuss next week?
Sure. Next week, so I'm going to introduce what Kobo Toolbox is, and we're going to go through just some very basic things on how to create a questionnaire in that. It is a free tool. You can also do a paid version, but I'll explain a little bit how we're using it, and why different organizations use it. Basically, in a nutshell, it is a big digital cabinet of keeping information, and usually through questionnaires that are administered with stakeholders. So we'll go through some of the pros and cons of it and just basically how it can be used and why people use it in general.
Thank you. Lindsay, thank you again so much for a wonderful presentation. Everyone, thank you so much for your dynamic and participatory engagement today. And we look forward to seeing you next week. So have a wonderful week, a great rest of the day, and talk to you all very soon.